Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the San Francisco Playhouse virtually here. We're having another in our series of Fireside Chats, talks with America's great playwrights, where we talk about the process of writing plays, the process of discovering plays, what playwrights have to say about this insane time we're living in. And I'm very, very thrilled tonight to have a very great friend. I say old friend, although neither of us are old, but we've known each other for a few decades and actually had one of our early acting successes together on the stage. So, like many of our playwrights, this particular playwright is a double, triple threat. She's a director and a very, very fine actor. Still acting on television and in film and on the stage, but also turned her hand to playwriting about 10, 15 years ago. I'd like to welcome Lisa Ramirez. Hi
Hi.
there, Lisa.
Hi,
Good to see
Bill.
you. You're
You
a
too.
sight for sore eyes. I think
Oh,
last time I
sorry for
saw
that.
you,
What's
we
that?
were in New York at some little cafe. We were in New York at some little cafe having ice cream. And what was the
Yeah.
play? You were in a play. It was a really
Oh,
good
good grief.
play.
Good grief at the
Good
Vineyard
grief.
Theater. Yeah.
Yeah. And who was the playwright?
Ngozi. Oh my God. Can't
I
pronounce her
know.
last name. Ngozi.
But
Ngozi.
anyway, she's
Yeah.
also an actor and was in her play, right?
Exactly.
She writes for herself. Yeah. As you do.
Yeah, I
Are
do
you?
sometimes.
Yeah.
I started out writing for myself. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But I want to tell everybody about our great theater experience together. Lisa and I were in a production of View from the Bridge
Yeah.
a couple of decades ago, and it was in Marin County.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a great time with the cast. We had Will Marchetti, the great Will Marchetti, playing Eddie, and a whole host of other brilliant actors.
Ed McClellan
And just,
was your brother.
yeah, directed by
Ben Dixon.
Ben Dixon, yes.
And Sharon Boucher was in it.
Sharon Boucher was in it, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It was an all-star cast. I remember as we got close to production, I remember it was cold. It was the middle of the winter.
Yeah.
And we were so excited that we would stand outside the theater in the cold, just like standing there shivering and yakking at each other outside the
Yeah,
theater
it was a beautiful
at
moment.
midnight, at like for an hour, in that palpable excitement when you know you've got a hit on your hands. And the
Yeah.
show opened. The show, it's one of those shows. It's the only show I've ever been involved in where this happened, where there were 24 performances, 24 sold out performances, and 25 of those instant standing ovations where the lights go down, and when the lights come up, all the people are already standing up.
Yeah. That
I've
was a
never
once
had that.
in a lifetime thing.
Have you ever had that happen to you since? I've had standing ovations and shows that had them, but not that where everybody rises as one. That's the only
Mm-hmm.
time it's ever happened.
I had that with To the Bone in
Yeah,
New York. Yeah. But I know what you
in the
mean.
New
It
York.
was really a once in a lifetime experience because it was great direction, great set, great actors, and it was like it felt like the days where that I longed for, where like Jason Robards and everybody went out afterwards, and they loved the work, they loved each other. It was deep and messy, and all,
Stayed
all,
up all
all the things we love.
night singing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
And
was
you
one
used
of
to give me
those.
rides
Anyway, it was
home
one of
because
those.
I didn't have my driver's license back then. Remember?
That's right. Right. Yeah. Long chats on the way home. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a good time. And Ben, who directed it, and Will had done it before.
That's
And
right.
Ben had played the part I played, Marco. and they had sat in a bar for 5 years talking about how they could do it better.
Oh,
So by
really?
the time they got to this production, we had the entire thing completely figured out. So we just did it, you know. And
Wow.
it sort of kicked off both our careers, really. You
Yeah.
know, Lisa Ramirez and Bill English were not we hadn't done anything. It was sort of our first sort
It
of
was my first
semi-major
play outside
opportunity
of, yeah, yeah, it was my first play
outside
outside
of
of San
school, yeah.
Francisco State.
We had
Yeah.
been studying at the Gene Shelton acting school,
Yeah.
and then we got these jobs.
Yeah.
So it really was a great moment. So tell us a little bit about how you got into playwriting.
Well, I've always loved writers and I've always loved plays. And I think because, like we were taught by Gene and Shelton and Stella Adler how to read a script, how to analyze a script, and that the written word was so important. And so, so for a while, I had a theater. I was like, unbeknownst to me, was like just became the literary director with like Actors Theater of San Francisco. I was the
Yeah,
one finding all the
right, of
scripts and reading
course.
all the scripts.
Yeah,
And then when that ended, I became the literary director for Brava for Women in the Arts for a couple of
right.
years in San Francisco,
About that.
and curated all these plays. And this was before I started writing, but I got to study with Irene Fornes and hang out with Naomi Azuka and all these, like Ella McLaughlin, all these amazing playwrights. You know, Irene Fornes being one of them, and Shri Moraga, and I loved words. And then I moved to New York for acting, and my side job, because I had been a preschool teacher in San Francisco, was I was a nanny, and I started to hear all these stories from nannies. And Eve Ensler, who I had met in San Francisco, was kind of a mentor. And I met this woman one day who had just been fired. I was nannying and she had just been fired. She'd been with this little boy from the time he was born, basically. And she was from Trinidad, and they fired her because they felt like he was older, and they fired her saying he needed more stimulation. And I was completely devastated by her story. So Eve Ensler just happened to call me that night, and I was like, my logic at the time was like, I'm going to become a bartender or a waitress like my other actor friends, like this nanny thing. It's just too intense. It's too depressing. And she was like, no, it's actually just the opposite. There's a reason that this woman sat on that bench and told you the story. You have to tell the story, or these women's stories might not be heard. And I didn't. And so it was sort of like a challenge to me. She goes, stay, listen, keep your ear to the ground and listen. And so at the same time, about a week later, I was in this cafe that no longer exists. It was when Williamsburg was a little bit less Williamsburgy, Brooklyn. And I was in this cafe that was also a bookshop. It's no longer there. And I was sitting having coffee, and this book literally fell off the shelf. And it was a poet, a Puerto Rican poet named Martin Espada, and it was called Zapata's Disciple. And in the book, he was a lawyer, who also a poet, who wrote about the injustices of being a Latino man. And he wrote this poem about this janitor who worked for 33 years, and until he could buy a house for himself back in Puerto Rico, worked in New York as a janitor. And the whole thing is about the next morning, the lawyers all come to work, and there's orange peels in the toilet from, it's like a spiritual thing that he was now living with
Yeah.
orange trees, and that there was nothing left but orange peels in the garbage bins. So then he writes, I write for people who can't write, or people can't speak for themselves. I write in honor of my father. I write it. And so I just kind of felt like between Eve and Martin Espada, it was time for me to start writing something. And so I ended up writing this play, Exit Cuckoo, Nanny and Motherland, that I developed for a long time. Originally wrote it for 3 women, and then Eve and a couple other people said this is a solo show. I didn't want it to be a solo show, but it was a solo show. And then we did a run of it in New York. Coleman Domingo directed it. We did it here briefly. We did it in North Carolina, but the Working Theater, we did it in Ireland. The Working Theater in New York produced it, and they produce work about people, the working class, for and about people. So this was a perfect fit for their season. And after it was so successful, we had lots of domestic workers and lots of discussions and lots of union people coming. And afterwards, Mark Pleasant, the artistic director, asked me, is there anything else up your sleeve? And I kind of thought that was going to be my only play. But I had just read an article about this population of immigrant women people that lived up in Sullivan County, upstate New York, and they worked in the poultry plants. And I kind of got this idea that I wanted to take a crack at the Great American Play, and not just write a solo show, but write a big sweeping play of Mice and Men, but for Latino women. So I said, I'd like to take a crack at the Great American Play. And so he was like, all right. So they commissioned me, and I went up and I conducted all these interviews, and that became like a 3-year kind of odyssey. And I wrote that was my second play.
I think I saw that play. I saw it in at least 4 different versions.
Even around a tape.
I saw the very, very first reading of it that Lisa directed, that Danny Woolahan was in it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and then there was a reading of it out here with Camposanto, right?
Right.
And Michael Torres was in it, and
not Sean.
And Sean.
Yeah.
No, I think, but he was sort of being the sort of making it happen person.
Yeah, exactly.
But then I saw the premiere, which was Working Theater, right? And
no, it was Cherry Lane Theater.
It was at Cherry Lane Theater, but it was produced by Working.
No, Cherry Lane Theater produced it. Working Theater.
I see. They ended up. And actually, the New York Times did compare it to Steinbeck.
I think Time Out did. The New York Times was a different monster. The New York Times slammed it. There was the only one. She felt it was melodramatic. But whatever.
But
whatever.
It was, so you're kind of that plays kind of right on ripped out of the headlines right now, with all of the people at meatpacking plants that all seem to come down with COVID. I don't really understand that. Is that because they have to work so close together all the time? Don't they wear masks already in
some of
those
them
plants?
do?
I don't know, but it's been terrible the way those people have been almost singled out. By
I feel like the COVID situation has been kind of highlighting, injustices that have been happening forever. It's just, it's more out in the open now because COVID affects everybody.
Yeah, it does. It should be uniting the world, right?
Yeah. That's a whole nother topic.
Well, that's so yeah. What do you think? Here we are. We're all in lockdown, and theater is at a standstill, and there's this revolution and awakening in the country about around the murder of George Floyd and others, and just it's such a chaotic time. I've talked to 2 or 3 playwrights this week who feel like some people that are supposed to be writing plays for us, but they feel kind of stuck. I don't know how are you doing? Are you writing? What do we want to write about? What is in the air?
I'm certainly not writing about right now, because I don't think we're going to be able to digest it for a while. I mean, I think we're in action mode right now in terms of activism and
social,
taking care of ourselves,
racial
taking care of our families, taking care of our immune system. I mean, there's so many things going on. But I'm always writing. I've got like 3 things I'm working on, like one for theater and then 2 for other mediums. But I'm not writing about right now though. I can't. I'm not a journalist. I mean, I think that in time that this moment is going to sink in and it's gonna come out in the work. But I don't think, I had somebody contact me saying they wanted to interview people who were affected by COVID and write a 1-person show. And I was like, I don't even know what to tell you. Like, I mean, for my, like, I don't work like that. Like if I want to write something, I don't sit around and think like what I'm going to write about. Like, am I going to write about COVID? Am I going to write about something? Just comes to me and then I start writing. And sometimes I don't even know what it is. You know what I mean?
Right.
So,
It jumps out of the blue.
but I think it's very difficult. It's like this whole thing. I think it's very difficult to write or thrive when you're trying to survive. And I think a lot of people in the arts right now are trying to survive. A lot of people in the world. I mean, forget about art, but especially in the arts. I mean, we're shut down. Broadway's shut down until like 21, and that affects everybody. So it's very difficult. I mean, Eve used to always talk about that, like when Eve Ensler, when women are being subjected to all this stuff, they're in survival mode. You can't thrive. And I think in order to write, there's got to be some flow or some. You can't be worried about everything else.
Yeah, current events have sort of like taken over our heads.
Well,
The news.
it's more dramatic than anything we could ever write. The streets are like, that is the theater. That is the theater. People are in the street, and the next generation is like awe-inspiring. Every night out there, like the commitment, So I'm gonna like write a little story about, I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm always writing in a way. I'm always gathering, and I'm always saying, "This is my last play. This is the last thing I'm writing. This is it." And then something
I've heard
else.
that from you before.
Somebody will give me an idea, and I'll be like, "Oh," So.
Yeah. Well, we don't know what it will be, but you're acting too, right? Right now.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I'm
Weren't you?
working on The Wasteland by T.S. Eliot.
Oh yeah. Right.
Yeah.
I was just about to ask you about that. So tell us about the Wasteland and who's doing it and how they're doing it and how it figures in the world of today.
Well, The Wasteland is one of my favorite poems. It's just one of my favorite poems. It's by T.S. Eliot. It's about was written right after the Spanish. It was written 100 years ago, right after the Spanish flu. It was about the end of civilization, or that civilization. And so I kind of feel like, I mean, I said to Michael, like, I don't know, I come from the background of like, if theater isn't to my liking, then I'm just going to build my own theater. Like, I mean, and I think that like coming up in the 80s and 90s, like we did, like we just, if it wasn't happening, we made it. Like, you made this theater. I had a theater, or I'll find a family. I'll find my theater family. And so Ubuntu Theater Company, led by Michael Moran, is one of, like, I feel like the most exciting theater companies that I've seen in a decade or two, just in terms of the passion and the kind of like thinking outside the box and site specific work. And I find Michael Moran to be, I like his mind and his artistry and his inclusiveness without being told that he has to be. It comes naturally. So I called him and I was like, what do you think about, I was actually in New York, and I was listening to Quanah Cuomo's daily thingies, and I was on a little mini trampoline because the gyms were all closed. So I bought this mini trampoline. I was listening, and he started to talk about the drive-in theater, and I was like, "Ooh, what about the drive-in theater?" And then I thought, what about? But it would almost be weird to do a play in this moment, not only with the pandemic, but with the political situation as it is, like just do a little play in a parking lot. No. So I started to think about the Wasteland and performing the Wasteland with images and like in a drive-in. And Ubuntu, the space that we're in now, it's a flax art store, and there's like a warehouse behind it where we perform. And they did one of my plays down here below last year. That was an adaptation of The Lower Depths by Gorky.
Uh-huh.
And they
Right.
had a big parking lot. So I said to Michael, what do you think about the Wasteland? And you direct it, and I perform it, and we get a great videographer. And he's like, but how would people hear it? And I'm like, I would be mic'd, and we would like put like the cell phone, almost like the old driving movie. They put the speaker by the thing, or it could come through the car radio. We could figure that out.
Right. Right.
So we started kind of like, and then it was kind of like, they're not going to do it. But anyway, we just decided we were gonna take a crack at it. And I was coming out here for a few months anyway, because my niece is getting married, and my mom and my family lives out here, and I love to be out here for like half the year sometimes. So that's what we're doing. We just started working on it this morning, just going line by line, like we do.
Talking through it. Yeah. So
Yeah.
people are gonna now. Tell us about the configuration. How's that going to be set up? Like what? 20, 30 cars? You think? How many?
Probably 20.
20 cars.
20 cars.
And then you'll have some sort of a. Go ahead.
You'll have to buy your tickets in advance, and you'll get some kind of thing either to put on your phone or some radio station that we have to figure that out. But everything will be kind of like explained before coming. So nobody will really be outside of their cars. And then I will be in this area of the parking lot, and there will be projections and sound and a score. And I will dramatize the Wasteland like my favorite actress, Fiona Shaw, did like 20 years ago in an abandoned theater in New York and all over the world.
Did the Wasteland?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Wow.
So I know it can be done.
Yes. It's been done before.
It's been done.
Well,
Yeah.
that's great.
This will be our version of it to reflect on, like John, one of the literary people today was talking about, we're doing a play during the end of civilization about doing a poem. Well, he said it much more eloquently, but he talked about, here we are at this like big turning point, doing a poem that is about another big turning point. But he said it much better.
100 years ago, right after the Spanish flu.
Exactly.
So it's kind of timely. And we are a bit of a wasteland and an empty parking lot, an abandoned warehouse, and
Yeah.
30 cars.
And it's about loss and spirituality and all these kind of underground characters, and the end of a marriage, the end of, and there's all this like these religious references and prostitute. I mean, everything. It has everything in it.
You did another show with them too. You did Streetcar.
Yeah, I did Blanche. I played their Blanche.
How was that?
Amazing. Amazing. I always want to do things longer. Yeah, and we did To the Bone. We did To the Bone also. And what else did I do with that? I was going to do Long Day's Journey, but then something else happened.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. So that's what's on the horizon for the next couple months.
That sounds great. Well, we'll have to get, if you can get me the word, I'll broadcast it to our San Francisco Playhouse people.
That would be amazing.
And we'll have a San Francisco Playhouse like drive-in popcorn.
Yeah, that would be great. That would be great.
Diet Coke night at Ubuntu. It's in Oakland, right?
Oakland, yeah.
Like in sort of the old train station area? Is that where it is?
Yeah, it's on 15th and I think Martin Luther King Way. So it's right near, I guess, the 19th Street station. But
So
no one
people,
needs to worry about that now because this is going to be in cars. But my hope is there are people that live right where the parking lot right above. My hope
right.
is they'll be able to tune in with their phones.
Well, they could sell space on their balconies.
No, we have to be careful. We have to be like socially distanced,
Well,
right?
families on their balconies can watch you. I always thought it'd be
That's what I
fun,
want.
like like a big apartment building where everybody faces the same way, to do a play in an empty lot in front of a building, like a
That
13-story
would be
building that has,
amazing.
like, yeah, every time you see one of those buildings, I go, "Oh, that'd be interesting." It's
Yeah,
to do theater in found spaces that are not regular. I'm thinking maybe Sam, maybe we'll do something outside.
that would be
Or,
amazing.
like, I've been looking into it. There's an amphitheater in Glen Park that will seat
Mhm.
like 500 people. So you could put 100 people distanced and do the
Exactly.
same thing, amplify so people could hear, and then do a play in the amphitheater. You'd have to do a Greek play with masks.
Yeah. Yeah. That would be
Why
great.
not? My other idea is we should only do plays with people who are actually couples,
Yeah.
so that they can kiss and make out and roll on the floor, and we'll all go, "Oh, oh,"
Such great acting.
because we can't have intimacy anymore,
I know.
unless you're
I
actually a
know.
couple already, you know. Like, you could do all those two-person couple plays, right?
Yeah. Or a family plays, right?
Or two brothers could do True West.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you could do like some kind you could do I don't know what play you could do with Susie and Lauren and Zelda.
We don't
Zelda
want to
was
entrap
still
her.
for
We're talking
show.
about, most of all, you know who Zelda is. Zelda is my granddaughter. But well, Lisa, thank you so much. Short
Thank
and
you.
sweet. It's good to hear from you, and good to hear about especially enjoyed listening to the process of writing and where your ideas come from. That's one of my favorite that I've heard since we started doing these. A book fell off the shelf and landed in my pie, you know, and I opened the book.
That's very Irene Fornes, actually.
Did things fall off the shelf into her world?
She was just very in touch with the unconscious, the subconscious, and she took everything she could. She took everything as a sign, or she would log it away. She was divinely inspired.
She was the best, the greatest. Anyway,
Wonderful.
Lisa, thank you so much. That was
Thank
so much
you,
fun.
Bill.
And
Goodbye, everybody.
we'll see you at the Ubuntu Drive-In uh,
Okay, good.
for the Wasteland by T.S. Eliot. Be sure to tune in. We'll let you all know what's happening. Anyway, thank you all very much for tuning in to our Fireside Chat with Lisa Ramirez, an old friend and a great playwright. And next week, we're going to have Gita Reddy, who some of you
Oh,
may
yeah.
remember. Gita was the playwright of our very first Sandbox.
I
Uh,
love Geetha's writing.
I know she's amazing. She's got such an imagination that's so outside the box. I mean, you absolutely never have any idea what she's going to come up with. But we're looking forward to talking to Gita next week. Thank you all so much. Please join our YouTube channel. It helps us out. If anybody wants to make a donation, we won't turn it down. Thank you very much. And we'll see you again for our next Fireside Chat.